looking at opening hands, it looks to me like Brad went ahead and mulliganed once, but from my vantage point, looks like exactly what you want out of an opening hand from Junk Creativity. You've got a couple of lands, some interactive pieces in Thoughtseize and Fatal Push. The Fable of the Mirror Breaker is going to be a great way to sort of bridge the gap to the mid game, and then your payoff in creativity.
Totally. Really good hand from Brad. He's going to just be kind of sweating the third and fourth land drop. The card he would really love to see is Renin 6, because that would allow him to make his land drops uncontested for the rest of the game. What do you think about Brad not casting Thoughtseize on turn 1?
I think it makes a fair amount of sense. The only real card that I would say I'm very afraid of from Brad's side that Arya can play on turn 2 is Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And unfortunately here, right, you see that Soul Cauldron, and it's kind of a punish for Brad not taking the line to Thoughtseize on turn 1. But more, I think usually if Arya plays a Young Wolf instead of a mana producing creature like a Delighted Halfling on turn 1, that means you don't have to worry about Grist or Yawgmoth until the third or fourth turns of the game. And maybe you can go get that Raucous Theater on turn 1 like Brad did to try and make your land drop, and then Thoughtseize on the second turn to hit something like a Grist or Yawgmoth before it comes down. Unfortunately for Brad, Arya did have the card that can punish that in Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Right. So Brad taking great pains to get maximum surveil value. It occurs to me that maybe if he had a hand that was more centered on persist and less centered on indomitable creativity, maybe he would have considered a different choice there. But this looks, well, I was going to say it looks okay in that he can go for the tapped land and then turn 2 Thoughtseize away your Grist angle. But the Soul Cauldron almost blocks Brad from taking the Grist. So a little bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for Brad Nelson.
Yeah, that's one of the big things about the addition of Agatha's Soul Cauldron to the Golgari Yawgmoth deck. If a Soul Cauldron hits the battlefield for Arya, it makes interacting with Grist and Yawgmoth significantly less profitable, right? Arya can just eat one of those cards with the Soul Cauldron, and now all of her creatures are Grists or Yawgmoths or whatever they need to be. And I think that really, right, that really goes to show that punish here by not Thoughtseizing on turn 1. Now most of Brad's interaction is just kind of blanked by the Soul Cauldron.
Yeah, so he decided to just take his medicine and take away the Grist. If Arya puts the counter on Brad's messaging us from beyond the grave. Not quite beyond the grave. He's got a few more turns before he's there, but he wrote in his notepad, I have no idea how this works. Well, I could tell you from having been on both sides of the Soul Cauldron that it almost always works the way you don't want it to as the opponent. So the Grist is gonna deliver its loyalty abilities to the Young Wolf. The one saving grace for Brad is that the Young Wolf can now be killed by a single removal spell, like that Fatal Push. But then that's one more creature in the graveyard for Arya to then make another creature with ++1 counter. So it's gonna be tough.
Yeah, I think at this point I think Brad's best route to victory is just hoping he can make those third and fourth land drops. And right, we see him find the third land here to be able to potentially deploy a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And I think his best way back in this game is to manage to set up a creativity for 1 and then maybe follow it with a creativity for 2 with all of the tokens that the Fable of the Mirror Breaker can produce to just try and overwhelm what Grist under the Soul Cauldron can do by just making more Archons than Arya can overcome. And if we look at Arya's hand, the Soul Cauldron and the Grist are about all she has going on with 3 lands in hand. I don't know that there's lots else that Arya can really do to fight through an Archon.
Okay, I like it. So you set us up, Jake, by saying that this Jund Creativity deck has some things in common with traditional Jund, like what I played. You know, you've got your Thoughtseize, your Fatal Push, your Fable. You're trying to manage your opponent's resources. But here we might see the other angle where Brad goes, okay, that's not working anymore. I can't outgrind Soul Cauldron and Grist. So now I'm going to turn my sights to the combo and try to go over the top. And that's why this creativity deck is an effective strategy in a multi-dimensional deck.
Exactly. It's something that actually I think it has a fair amount in common with the Yawgmoth deck in so much as they're both combo decks in one sense of the word, right? It's you have the creativity angle in creativity, you have the Yawgmoth loops involving sacrificing undying creatures to remove the +1/+1 counters from other undying creatures to take sort of an unfair angle. But one of the reasons that we've seen creativity and Yawgmoth stick around in the modern format for as long as they have is both of them can just win the game fairly, right? Jund Creativity has Fables and Ren and Sixes to just sort of grind through what its opponent's doing. And sometimes the Yawgmoth deck just attacks you with a bunch of dinky creatures, and that's enough, right? We see that Brad's already down to 13, and hopefully for his sake, there's an Archon on the way. But even then, right, it's not that hard to see a world where Arya sacrifices an insect token to the Archon trigger, and then the young wolf can act as a grist to remove 2 loyalty counters, sacrifice a creature, and blow up the Archon itself. So we're seeing some of that blend of unfair and fair out of both of these decks, and I think that's a big draw to this style of deck in Modern.
We should focus for a moment on Arya's tough decision on the previous turn. So careful viewers might notice that the young wolf used the plus ability of Grist, and Arya milled over a Gilded Goose, which is one more precious creature in the graveyard. So if she had wanted to just put her foot on the gas and go as hard as possible at building her own board, she could have main phase exiled the Gilded Goose, put a +1/+1 counter on something, and then continue using Grist ability. But remember that we know Brad's hand, and Arya has not yet gotten a glimpse of Brad's hand. So she's probably thinking, okay, Brad is finally getting access to Fable Chapter 2. He might have an Archon Persist type of hand where I really want to protect myself from that with the Soul Cauldron. So she, tanked for a while on her turn and decided to make the play that she decided to make like a significant sacrifice in order to play around persist here. But then once Brad does not discard Archon to the chapter 2, he decides it's safe to go ahead and ambush during blocks with the 2/3 Delighted Halfling. Makes total sense.
An Indomitable Creativity for 2 looks I have to assume it's targeting the dwarf token, and I'm wondering if it is it targeting the Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Yep, it
Oh
is
boy.
targeting the
Is
Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
that a good play, Jake? Talk us through that one.
I think it's a good play. I mean, you're going it solves some amount of the problem of Arya managing to use the grist downtick that is sort of funneled through the Agatha Soul Cauldron into the Young Wolf to remove the Archon that Brad's going to produce, and instead gives Arya a random creature or artifact out of her library. And in the case of the Golgari Yawgmoth deck, there are a lot of cards that are kind of blank, right? If Arya hits a Young Wolf, that's not all that exciting. Now we see her hit an Orcish Bowmasters, which is one of those cards that can help slog through the Archon's triggers a little bit, but it certainly is not as high impact at this point as the Soul Cauldron was for sure.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, that's a tough play because there's an element of randomness involved. And also, you know, Brad, in my opinion, made it a significant sacrifice there in using the treasure because that's something he could have used to fatal push or to set up an extra use of indomitable creativity later. But it looks like it's working out nicely for him. Arya lost access to the grist. didn't hit super well off the random creativity spike, and then drew a blank. So, now what?
It certainly on this board, it's a blank. I think that it is worth looking at Boseiju as a way to break up what could be the best possible turn here from Brad in Bitter Reunion can give the Reflection of Kiki Jiki haste, which would let Brad make another Archon. Here, the Boseiju will at least help break that up if that's the line that Brad goes for. But I still think, yeah, like you said, it's not fixing the problem of there's an Archon on the battlefield, and that's I think if I'm in Arya's seat, that my high priority is what can I do to fix that.
A good play from Brad. The Bowmasters is annoying against both Bitter Reunion and Archon, but looks like he is not going for your play of the. Oh, okay. I guess that the mana situation is a little bit off there. But yeah, he would have needed one more to do Fatal Push and Bitter Reunion and Haste and activate Reflection.
Here we see a good draw for Brad, given what he's got in hand right now. Bitter Reunion discarding Archon is no longer just a maybe I'll draw persist. It has the persist. We've got the persist in hand, and I figure we just see Brad go for it now, and just at this point try and slam the door by making a second copy of Archon of Cruelty.
Boy, for a game that started out looking pretty ugly for Brad Nelson, he has well and truly turned it around. Arya definitely stagnated a bit with a good start, and then I mean I think after turn 2 or 3 of the game, she only drew lands, so wasn't able
Yeah,
to really press that early advantage. But yeah, a fascinating game already right off the bat.
yeah, it's certainly from Arya's standpoint, it feels a little bit bad to start that far ahead and then have things go south, but I think that I think that what we saw there is creativity a lot of the time has the capability of being the bigger deck in the sense that Archon as a singular entity is significantly more powerful than any one card in Arya's deck, right? Arya, the onus is on
I
Arya
don't know,
to
Jake. There's Young Wolf. Young Wolf versus Archon.
I think I don't know, you're the Hall of Famer. You probably know better than I do, but I think that Archon hits a little bit harder than Young Wolf. Now we're gonna see Young Wolf come down earlier, and that certainly could make a difference. But what do you think from both of these opening hands, Reed? Who do you think who I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask you to pick a favorite with wildly not enough information.
Um, that so the key card that I want to keep my eye on here is Renin 6 because this is now game number 5 that we're watching with Jun Creativity this evening, and I think just the total number of resources and hitting the land drops is so huge for this deck. It really allows it to snowball, and then of course Arya's key card here, one of her key cards is Fulminator Mage. So if the Renin 6 is able to get on the battlefield and stick around, that's going to be great for Brad. Now he had yet again an interesting choice with these land drops. He didn't play the enters the battlefield tapped green source on turn 1, so he may have to wait on the Renin 6. But it seems like he'll probably be able to get that in time before um, things become too dire. He even takes away the Fulminator Mage with Thoughtseize. By the way, welcome to all Raiders coming from Jim Davis's channel. Stick around to see. This is a win and in for top 4 for anyone just joining in. We've also got periodic giveaways coming at the end of every match. So this is good fun. If you don't have plans for this evening, hang out with us, watch some Modern. It's going to be great.
Yeah, so here we see a little bit of awkwardness from Brad's draw from Brad's draw here, right? We see him drawing all three of these new surveil lands that are a pretty recent addition to Modern, and right, you certainly would like to, if you're Brad, be able to cast your Ren and 6 on turn 2 or whatnot. But Reed, how do you feel that that these surveil lands have impacted the Modern format so far? Have you been generally pretty happy with them? Have you felt they're a little clunky, as we see Arya deploy a surveil land of her own, as well as a Grist to start, like you said, snowballing with those resources in her own way, as opposed to Brad's?
They're cool. The surveil lands. When you and I played, I felt that they gave you a big advantage in the game three because we were both just kind of sitting there making land drops, not doing much. Sometimes Ren and Six was involved, and you had three surveil lands. I think it was at least three, and
Yeah,
I only
I
had one. So I was one and done, and I was like, oh man, I wish I had more of these to search for and filter my draws in these long games. And it's one of the cool things about Modern that it can go very fast or it can go very slow. And in those medium to slow length games, having access to a surveil land in your mana base to find off the fetch land is just so powerful.
Now, Reed, I'm interested in picking your brain a little bit about this play that Brad just made. We saw an end step lightning bolt target Grist to put the Grist to 1 loyalty. And then Ren and 6 came down and had a pretty interesting decision point. Either Ren and 6 can tick up, get out of range of Arya's creatures for the turn, and pick up a Wooded Foothills, or tick down and answer the Grist, deal that final point of loyalty, and then likely succumb to an attack from the Young Wolf and the Insect. What do you think of that play? What are you thinking about that play if you're in Brad's seat here?
Boy, it's one of those classic moments where it's, do you play the Jund resource management game plan or do you play the combo game plan? Given Brad's hand, where he has both Bitter Reunion and Fable of the Mirror Breaker, it seems like the additional cards in hand, the additional resources, are going to be used to such great effect that I kind of like his choice. He picks up the land right away, so that's immediately one more card in hand. Then the Red and Six survives the turn, so it's another permanent on the battlefield, another land to his hand the following turn, soaking up damage, setting him up to use these discard effects. So it makes sense to, well, in both of the games that we've seen, emphasize the combo element of the deck because that's what's going to work against Arya's super resilient threats in Golgari Yawgmoth.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And here, it looked like Brad had sort of locked everything up with the Ren and 6 tick down on this turn after making an Archon of Cruelty to put the Grist down to get the Grist out of range of, yes, to get the Grist out of range of activating to remove the Archon. But here we see Arya top deck a Court of Calling to put the namesake Yawgmoth Ran Physician into play, and that is not you that is rarely where you want to be if you're playing against Golgari Yawgmoth, is your opponent putting the card Yawgmoth onto the battlefield.
Super cool turn because at face value, there's a single Archon of Cruelty against a Grist with two counters. So you're like, okay, Arya's going to use the -2 ability and kill off the Archon. But immediately upon drawing the Court of Calling, she +1 to the Grist to get one more body on the battlefield and then courted for Yawgmoth. I think correctly identifying that this is such a strong position, tapped out opponent, 16 life points, robust board. Arya could basically pay 14 life, and if she finds Zulaport Cutthroat or Court of Calling at any point in those top 14 cards, she immediately wins the game by fully comboing off. Now,
Mhm.
interestingly, that's not a deterministic kill. It's just a very likely kill. And after 5 or 6 draws, she'd only found lands, but Brad went ahead and conceded anyway because he didn't feel like the odds were in his favor there, and he wasn't willing to sit through it.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an interesting point. I'm curious what I saw Arya scroll a little bit through her hand, and we did see that cutthroat there, so I think that was it. But
Oh, my mistake. Okay, I must have not seen that.
no, it's I
It's also possible that Arya could have won even without drawing into anything. Just 6 -1 counters on your Archon, kill your kill your Ren in 6, and then have an overwhelming
Yeah.
board. So that was her game for sure. But very cool. Both decks again showing the combo element, the surprise kill.
Here we're gonna see Reed keep a or I'm sorry, Brad, excuse me, keep a very land heavy hand, which I think is generally okay from the Jund creativity side, right? We've talked at length about how important getting those lands into play, getting those resources into play is from the creativity side. So I like this. I like this from Brad's side. Tell me a little bit about Arya's opener.
Arya's opener is, I guess, just doing the Yawgmoth thing where it's not particularly explosive, it's not particularly disruptive, but what it is very resilient. And that's actually going to be important since Brad's key early play here is Fatal Push. But Arya wants to build out with Young Wolves, maybe get the Zulaport Cutthroat out there, and then either tap 4 lands for a Yawgmoth or Court of Calling for something to set up the combo and or bridge the gap.
Here we're gonna see, like you had mentioned, those surveil lands in modern really making a huge difference, helping fix some of the inconsistencies in Brad's draw, given how land heavy it is. Right, you see a land on top, you get rid of it, you fix that half of it. Oh, and here's an Archon in the graveyard making persist a very live draw from Brad's side.
On this turn, Arya's going to be able to Court of Calling for 2. Is there anything cool that can enter the battlefield for X equals 2 or less?
Pulling up Arya's deck list right here, we've got, as far as bullets go, we have one Strangleroot Geist, a Haywire Might could enter the battlefield. I don't think that either of those are all that exciting. And with the draw of Orcish Bowmasters, I think we're likely to see that be the call from Arya's side, especially because the Orcish Bowmasters can kill the Dwarven Mind Dwarf in response to a Transmogrifier creativity to help neutralize that combo game plan that we've been talking about, and thus Brad's gonna just go ahead and wait as well. With the creativity in hand, you can try and set up multiple dwarves at once to make multiple to attempt to make multiple archons.
Yeah, boy, nice play from Brad. I envisioned a world, uh, kind of like watching NASCAR for the car crashes, where like maybe Brad just goes for it there. He goes for the dwarf and the transmogrify and gets blown out by the bowmasters. But this looks like it's gonna work out nicely for him because if Arya hits a land, she's gonna play Yawgmoth, and Brad is ready for that with fetch land plus fatal push, and then the opportunity to untap and maybe have creativity for 2. So this is a game where it's not just about the cards that are drawn, but also how each player is going to choose to play them.
Those are the best kinds of games, right? That's the exact kind of excitement we have here on MTGO Masters. 1 game to 1, playing for a top 4 slot. Both players have lots of the resources they need at their disposal to win any given game. And it's gonna come down to who makes those decisions just a little bit better, who can get things to line up a little bit in their favor, which is right. That's as much as you can ask for out of a quarterfinals match.
Great comment in chat that it can actually be a downside for Arya that she has Zulaport Cutthroat in hand because it means it's not available as a Court of Calling target. Um, there's some world, depending on the post sideboard configuration, where you could go for a win here by casting Yawgmoth, drawing a bunch of cards, trying to find an endurance as a free green creature that you could play, and then cord for your Zulaport Cutthroat.
Oh, and
That
this is a
is turned off.
great line from Arya with putting the Zulaport Cutthroat into play now and then playing the land afterwards. That can potentially turn on Court of Calling for 4 to go get the Yawgmoth, sort of do the inverse of what we were just talking about. But and I think this forces the hand from Brad to go and just cash that fatal push in on something way worse than a Yawgmoth Thran physician.
If I'm puzzling everything out correctly, this is going to be Arya's game, and once again, great play from Arya, not just going for the Yawgmoth straight out, because that would have run into the thing that I had mentioned of Brad fatal pushing Yawgmoth. But here, Brad can creativity for two. Arya has the option to cord for a Bowmasters, or do something to disrupt it if she wants. But in any case, she's going to be able to untap with two Young Wolves, Cutthroat, and 4 mana to cast a Yawgmoth. So I see this as what you outlined, Jake, where Brad can combo, but the Yawgmoth combo actually trumps it.
And I think we're gonna see likely a Court of Calling for 2 here from Arya. Get that Orcish Bowmasters answer, stop one of those Archon of Cruelties from coming down, and then the Yawgmoth is gonna do its thing, and that's gonna be all she wrote. Very impressive stuff from both players. I think both players played this game really well from each side. It just Arya finding the way to kind of weave through Brad's interaction and set up a clean combo.
I agree, Jake. Great match. Lots of unintuitive plays, lots of opportunities where people could have kind of run face first into a trap if they had been hasty or not thoughtful enough. But true to form, these are two great competitors, and we saw some really nice stuff, resulting in the end of Arya winning a close 3-game match.
There we go. It's congratulations to Arya Karamchandani for closing that out and locking up her spot in the top 4 of MTGO Masters.